Shalom, welcome to the Jewish View. My name is Rabbi Nachman Simon with the Chabad House of Delmar, together with my co-host Mark Ronich of Statewide News Service and JBizTechValley.com. We'll get it one day. But we have a very, very special guest with us, Senator Parker from Central Brooklyn. Senator, welcome to the Jewish View.
Rabbi, thanks very much for having me.
You have so many Jews in your district. I mean, Jews aren't foreign to you over here.
Not at all.
How many people do you represent?
Well, a little bit less now than I used to. So I represent currently now part of Canarsie and part of Flatlands, but principally Flatbush and East Flatbush, Midwood, Ditmas Park, Kensington, Windsor Terrace, and Park Slope. So I still have a very large Jewish community. But I used to represent all of. I still have a piece of Borough Park. But I used to have all of Borough Park prior to the last redistricting. So I actually used to brag about being the non-Jew who represented more Jews than any other non-Jew in the state. So it was really quite a distinction, and certainly an experience having a lot of close contact with that community.
So they chopped up Borough Park into like 3 Senate districts?
Yeah, essentially what happened in the last redistricting, as you know, we do the census every 10 years, and then predicated on that census, we actually do a redistricting where seats that are proportional, like the city council, like the state senate, like the state assembly, they redraw the lines. In the last one that was done in 2012, they drew the lines to actually create an Orthodox seat, which now Senator Simcha Felder represents.
They did that on purpose, you mean?
Yes, absolutely. It was, I think, and there's actually some political debate about how this worked, because prior to that, you had about 5 state senators who represented that area. Myself in the 21st, the 20th district, which was Eric Adams, the 18th.
Martin Golden.
You had Martin Golden had a piece. Diane Savino had a piece.
Oh, really?
Carl Kruger had a piece, and so you had a number of people who needed to respond. So they gave you some numbers. Some people argued that that was a better arrangement. Others felt like they didn't have someone who really represented the interests of the Orthodox community. They wanted a person who was Orthodox to represent them in the Senate, which is what they have now. And so now you have Simcha Felder, who represents all of Borough Park, most of Midwood, some of Kensington, and Point South, Marine Park, and other areas.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to be that way. I mean, you're a good person, you can represent.
I don't think it was personal about me. I just think that every group, and this is not just for Jews, African Americans are the same way, Latinos are the same way, Asians are the same way. They want their own person. And I think that's essentially what it was. And then also, if we can talk a little bit of politics here, I think that the Republican Party in the state Senate wanted that also because they had an arrangement with Senator Felder to then conference with the Republicans, which would keep them more in the majority.
But they also had an opponent for Simcha Felder, David Starobin, who would have also been conferencing with the Republicans.
Correct.
So either they didn't like Starobin, they liked Felder more than Starobin?
Starobin, that's not a Republican district, and they just knew that once you actually cut it in the way that they cut it, that they would have the best of both worlds, a Democrat who would conference with the Republicans.
That's the best of both worlds?
For the Republicans it is.
For the Republicans, rather than having a Republican...
A Republican couldn't win that district. It's a Democratic district.
Right.
Yeah, in that area, the people who live there, who are mostly ultra-Orthodox, are Democrats.
Well, let me ask you, when you vote based on your conscience and what you would like to see, or do you take a poll and vote the way your constituents want you to?
Interestingly enough, I think it depends. I think all of us as state legislators, or even as a city legislator, that sometimes you're a leader and sometimes you're a representative. There are some times that I feel like I'm just representing my district and I'm doing what my district wants. There are other times when I'm taking a vote of conscience where I think that this is the right thing to do, even if people in my community disagree. There's actually a really good book called Leadership on the Line, where I can't think of Martin's last name right now, but the guy's a lawyer in law school at Harvard, and he wrote this book. Essentially says that leaders, people aren't leaders, that you only have leadership moments, and then you're only taking a leadership moment when you're doing something that's dangerous. And so if you can lose your election or you can get hurt, then he's saying that's when you become a leader. That being said, there's some times when I've done things when I thought they were a leadership vote. We'd take marriage equality, which was very controversial. Even though most of the people in my district, including the Orthodox community, was very against it, I thought it was the right thing to do. And I took a vote that I think represented what I thought was the best thing to do, despite the fact that the vast majority of people in my district probably disagreed with it. There's other times when I've done things exactly because I know that that's what the community wants, and it was important for it to do that.
Martin Linsky.
Martin Linsky, that's it.
Okay.
That's right.
Thank goodness for computers on your phone, smartphones.
Yes, Martin Linsky, yeah. So it's a really good book. I recommend it, but I think it really speaks to this notion of representation versus leadership.
Okay. So what, do you choose your committees because they mirror your constituency, or do you choose committees based on what you would prefer and how?
Both. I think there's obviously nothing that we have. There's no committee issues that we're dealing with that aren't in some ways impactful on what we're doing in the community. Even agriculture. When I first got into the Senate, I was on the agriculture committee. And you think, wow, what is a New York City, Brooklyn kid doing an agriculture committee? But I learned a lot, and believe it or not, the connection between agriculture and Brooklyn is very, very strong. My people, in my district like to eat all the time, right? Even the Jewish ones, right? They want to eat every day,
of course,
right? And actually,
they eat more than else.
Food doesn't move around here in the synagogue with it.
Exactly, and so, what most people don't know, what New Yorkers most of the time don't know, especially in New York City folks, is that agriculture is the number one industry in the entire state of New York, right? And so we're the second apple producer in the entire country. We're
second in dairy.
Second in dairy behind Wisconsin.
Second in broccoli.
Yes.
Second in lettuce. Second in onions.
Yes.
Yes, we're second in wine.
Mark is the expert on New York.
Right,
No, he knows the stuff.
So maple products, we're second in Vermont. Maple products, we're second in Christmas trees from North Carolina. There's a lot of things that we really do well here. And when you look at the top industries, agriculture is one of them. So I'm no longer on that committee. And so there's always, my point was being that there's always something that they're doing on a committee that is appropriate to your community. But I do have, now that I have a little bit more seniority, a set of committees that I think are down both my expertise as a legislator, but then also what I think my community is concerned with.
So you're ranking member of the Senate Energy and Telecommunications Committee.
Yes.
How many years have you been in before?
11 years. This is my 11th year in the Senate.
Okay. And Senate Energy and Telecommunications Committee.
Right.
Why? What's going on in the energy field, the telecommunications field, that is important for the committee right now?
Everything. Well, particularly as you talked about energy, as we talk about industries and energy, that energy is actually the 5th largest industry in the entire state of New York after agriculture, financial services.
Tourism. No, tourism's number 2.
Financial services.
It's not. Okay.
Educate. We can argue about this later, Mark.
No, I understand.
Education, healthcare, and then energy.
Okay.
Right. And so there is a great deal of energy assets that we have here in the state, and actually managing those assets is part of what we do in the energy and telecom community. So there's actually 2 pieces that I'm actually really involved in. The first is increasing both as a commodity and as an industry, alternative energy, right? Solar voltaic, wind, tidal power, all those kind of
fracking?
things.
That's obviously a hot issue.
That's a huge issue.
So how do you fall on that?
Well, I think that if we can do it in a safe manner that doesn't endanger the water supply of the largest city in the country, then we ought to look at it.
Look at how North Dakota's booming. I mean, you
But
can't
it's
buy
North
a house
Dakota.
there. But you can't buy a house there now. I mean, it's just so expensive and it's just so crowded now. I mean, it's incredible.
If we have to trade, it's not a fair trade to trade energy for a safe water supply. And everybody's going to want safe, clean, drinkable water. And so what I haven't gotten yet, although I've asked for it several times, is a list of some of the proprietary chemicals that are being used in the fracking process.
Keep waiting.
And so, without that list, I can't do an independent assessment of whether those chemicals they're using are either digestible and safe, or whether they can be.
That's the leap of faith.
Well, I'm not willing to do.
And they're using the ash that they create in Pennsylvania when they do fracking to pave our roads, and they bring it back here to do, to use here.
Okay.
So
fracking.
And no one's dying from the ash. And
ash is different than putting it in the water.
Well,
so,
that's true.
Right,
but I'm just saying, you have these environmentalists who are so taken by the fact that, oh my gosh, we're not even benefiting from the fracking, but yet we're taking their ash and we're spreading it over, miles of road, and I mean, just,
right. Well, I think that
it's
the ash is one thing. Doing actual hydrofracking and putting chemicals in our water that we are not familiar with, that we don't know whether they can be mitigated or treated in some way, or whether they're in fact harmful to us, is something I'm not concerned about. But the second issue, if I could, that I'm really concerned about on the telecom end is actually broadband. There's actually two issues. There's actually one, broadband, and one is privacy. Access to broadband across the state is one of the big issues. It's almost becoming a right? People are like, the pursuit of happiness and access to free internet, right? Everybody wants that, and so we really ought to be making sure that broadband is broadly available to people in our state. And obviously, we want to be careful about privacy, about what things people have access to, and how do we, in fact, make sure that everything is just not out there on the net just for general consumption.
How do you feel about Comcast and Time Warner coming together?
Again, if it's good for business and it's good for the consumers, both in terms of price and variety of choices, then I'm all for it. And so we'll see. Right now, I think that from a business perspective, we're looking at a narrowing of
choices.
Of choices of providers. Yeah. But that may in fact lead us to better pricing. If it leads to better pricing for consumers, then I think it's a good thing.
Okay. Let me ask you about some of the bills that you brought up.
Yes.
That you were.
Well, I'm a legislator, right? And so
yes.
I was always told that legislators do legislation. So I actually have the dubious distinction of actually holding more pieces of legislation than anybody else in the entire legislature. Over 400 pieces right now.
Well, then let me ask you about this Hate Crimes Graffiti bill.
Yes.
Tell me, why did you want to sponsor it? What brought you to the point where you thought this was a problem?
Yeah, this is a very important bill. Actually, is being co-sponsored by my good friend David Wepper in the State Assembly, and we've been working on this bill for about almost 2 years. And the notion of it was that there is, as you probably have heard, a rise in anti-Semitic and hate and racial graffiti sometimes on synagogues, sometimes on people's private houses, and
sometimes
other
on
places.
Cars and,
sometimes on cars and other places. And so we really felt that we needed to do something legally to let the folks know that this is unacceptable behavior, and that we weren't, as a state government, going to tolerate this. And so I put in a bill that actually elevates the notion of hate, or the action of hate speech in the form of graffiti, to a hate crime, which adds an additional penalty to the action. And so we just passed the bill in the full Senate. It's now in the Assembly, and so it'd be great if groups that who think that this is a good idea to write letters to Sheldon Silver and let him know that we should pass this bill in the Assembly.
Would easily pass it. What do you think?
Well, we've gotten a lot of support.
Yeah.
The Anti-Defamation League has written a letter of support for it, and they're supporters of it. The New York Urban League is supporting us.
What would be the reservation
and
on the Assembly
and the state
side?
NAACP.
What would be the reservation on the Assembly
Well,
side?
I think just generally, my sense is that generally that the State Assembly doesn't like to do things that increase penalties on crimes, regardless of what they are. And so they just kind of generally go that way. But this, I think, is something that's so serious that we really, really need to pay attention to it and make some exceptions. I actually agree with their policy. I do think that all policies should have common sense, exceptions, and I think certainly this should fall into one of those categories.
So let me ask you about the New York CARES Act.
Yes.
Tell me about that.
Well, New York CARES Act is a bill that actually would help veterans get credit in colleges for their skills, their experiences, and the training they've had while they've been in the military. Interesting thing that's happening right now is because of the ending of both the Iraq and the Afghanistan wars, we're having people returning back to the United States. About 2 million people, 2 million veterans, right? Many of them combat veterans are returning back to the United States. About 45,000 of them, Rabbi, are coming back just to New York.
Really?
Yeah, huge. And then, as you know, we have a GI Bill. Mm-hmm. But what we do know is that after World War II, when the GI Bill was introduced, the year after that, we had about 53% of all the college students in the entire United States were veterans. So we could actually, even from that experience, know that we're going to have a lot of veterans coming back into our colleges. But the reality is that while they've been in the military, they've had experience, they've had training, right? They've developed skills and abilities that they are not getting credit for in the context of college credits. And we need to be able to translate those things into college credits so that we can help them move on to a life in civilian life, help them get degrees, sometimes undergrad degrees, sometimes associates or
I applaud you for that because, it's, a few of them, again, I'm a rabbi, so clergymen, people come with their troubles and people can't find jobs. And I have counseled a few veterans and, I said, well, what did you do in the military? You can't get a job. Oh, that's going to be worthless. No one cares about that. I said, well, you did something there, So I applaud you for raising that
Thank
idea.
You. Yeah, and it's actually a great idea. There's a number of colleges that are doing things similar right now. The largest example in the state of New York is Empire State College. And if you're familiar with that model, is one of the 22 colleges in the system. I'm sorry, there's more colleges than that. And
64 campuses.
64 campuses, but there's
more colleges,
right.
Yeah.
Empire is through the online.
Right.
Right, but it's also part of the SUNY system.
Right, it's part of the SUNY system, right? And what they do is they do take a lot of your, like if you've had a job and you got a certificate for welding, they will figure out a way to give you credit for that certificate you got, or some other experience that you got,
some vocational
skills that you might have gotten, or some kind of training that you might have gotten. So if you've gotten some training, say through your local cable access on how to do video preparation, they would actually find, maybe you were getting a communications degree, they might find a way to give you credit for that in the context of your communications degree. Right. We're saying use that same methodology for our combat veterans and help them, matriculate through the college system and get degrees that will help them translate into life.
And where is this going in the assembly?
So right now, that bill has passed the Senate Veterans Committee. We're waiting for it to come to the full Senate, and so we certainly need Dean Skelos and Senator Jeff Klein to bring this to the floor. And the Assembly likes the bill, and hopefully it'll move there too.
There? Do you know offhand?
Senator Assemblyman Felix Ortiz has that bill. And hopefully we'll be moving it there as well very, very shortly.
Now, what about the Crisis Intervention Team, the CIT?
Well, this one is really, really important. I think that this is something that I know that we worked a lot with when I represented Borough Park, and this was a problem in every community, not just the black community or the Jewish community, but almost everybody has a problem in issues of mental health. And a lot of times we have people who have mental health problems who don't want to admit it. And then sometimes they wind up in crisis. And sometimes our families will call the police because they don't necessarily know what to do. And so what this says, what currently happens now is that if you have somebody who's having a mental health crisis, a lot of times we'll call the police. The police, or we'll call 911. They have really two responses. They have a medical response or a crime response. The problem is that if somebody's going through a mental health crisis, is neither in a medical emergency nor they're a criminal. But the police show up, and when all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And so they oftentimes are treating our community members or our loved ones like criminals in situations where they're not really committing a crime. But then because they're acting out, the police wind up arresting them, they wind up in jail, and so on and so forth. So what the CIT is a crisis intervention team. It is actually a pilot that we're trying to launch statewide that would both train police departments and give them access to mental health resources, so that when they're responding to a crisis, that they actually could respond in a different way other than a criminal way. And so they would know how to assess it, how to interact with that person, and how to get them the resources that they need and the treatment that they need without arresting them or beating them or even killing them. In New York City last year, we had 56 killings of people who were going through mental health crisis. Really? 56.
That's a lot. Again, I applaud you totally because, again, one of my 10 jobs, like I say, is I do visit prisoners in jail in the state. And there's not that many Jews, but I do meet many different people because it's open, whatever. But one of the statistics they tell me is a third of the state prison population is mentally ill.
Absolutely.
And and I met people there, and it's just they need help. And I've had people help, like they're alcoholics. Even then, besides mentally ill, but you could say alcoholism is also a mental disease, and even drug. And they're asking for help, and they don't get the help they need. You're right. It's either criminal or Or, okay,
medical,
go to
right.
get an operation,
Right.
and that's not what they need. They don't need
Rabbi, so my other job outside of being the ranking member on energy and telecom is I'm actually also the ranking Democratic member on the Committee on Alcoholism and Substance Abuse, right? So we've been coming at it from that position as well. And the vast majority of the people that we're dealing with alcohol and substance abuse problems have a underlying mental health problem, and they're self-medicating with alcohol or substance.
interesting. I never heard that.
Yes,
That's very
absolutely,
interesting.
absolutely. And so part of what and so it's prison. But it's not even just prison. There's people who are living in our communities, people who are living in our homes and in our families who are having these problems. And we really need to figure that out. And I think you're right. There is a larger context in terms of mental health that we have to address. But certainly in terms of our police. And we're very excited about this also because the new police commissioner in New York City, Commissioner Bratton, actually implemented a crisis intervention team model when he was the LA police commissioner.
Do you like Commissioner Bratton?
We're working together now, and so we'll see.
Are you a fan from the first time he
well,
was commissioner?
Well, I'm not sure if I'm a fan, but I'm certainly willing to give him an opportunity to help us work through some of the things that we've been concerned about, like stop and frisk, like crisis intervention teams, and so I'm giving him a clean slate to work this time, and let's see how we work together.
Let me ask you something I was from 2008, and I just totally forgot about. But Simcha Felder, who's now a colleague, even though he's on the other side, ran against you.
He did.
In a primary.
He did.
And are you happy that he's conferencing with the Republicans? Or
well,
are you
certainly
friends?
I'm not happy. Well,
are you friends?
We are friends. We were always friends.
Oh, okay.
And certainly I tell people don't confuse political battles with friendships. So me and Simcha always had a great relationship. Prior to him running against me, he actually was one of the city council people that I represented in that community.
Right.
So we worked very closely together. It was a political thing that happened, and it was fine. I won the election.
Right.
We still work together very, very closely. He's still right now. He's the commissioner of. Sorry, not the commissioner. He's the chairman of the Committee on Children and Families here in the Senate. He's a great chairman. He's somebody that I've had a close relationship with. His staff has been very open to us working together.
I just find it ironic that here you had two people who were running against each other. Now they're both serving because of the way the district lines were drawn, and you were able. He always wanted to be a senator. Now he is, even.
Absolutely. So it's one of these things. It's one of these things where you don't have, permanent allies, just permanent interests. And I think that Simcha and I have always believed in the same things in terms of representing our communities, making sure people have access to quality education, housing, and make sure our families are safe, and so we continue to be united around those issues. So
the slogan, it's business, not personal.
It is never personal. It's always business.
You both had above in the campaign. It was
above
above
if you
board.
If you go back and look at maybe articles, I define a harsh word between me and Simcha Felder. Like we've always worked well together. Like I said, that was a moment in time. It was probably in the years that I've known him, that literally was a 3 or 4 month exercise in probably a 10-year relationship, right?
Okay.
So
sometimes it destroys those long-term friendships. That's why I'm asking.
Between me, if anybody knows Simcha Felder, he has the right name, Simcha. I don't know if you know what Simcha means. It means joy. So
all right, Hebrew. All right, you're part of the Jewish
at least that word.
At
least that word. So I just wanted to. I just wanted to clear the air and just get your sense, because I never even spoke to you about it personally. Right. I just never totally forgot. You're vice chair of the Black, Puerto Rican, Asian Legislators?
I used to be vice chair of the association.
Right.
So there's actually two separate entities. Right. There is actually the Legislative Caucus, which is the body of legislators that do the work day to day around legislation and making sure that the issues of African Americans, Latinos, and Asians are being represented within the total body. In addition to that, we have a nonprofit organization, which is the association. Formerly, I served as the association vice president. I'm no longer the association vice president, but was elected at one point to do that work. And the work that we mostly do there is some scholarship work, but we also run a conference every year during President's Weekend, in which we bring up our constituents from around the state and talk about the issues that are important to our community and try to figure out ways to develop a unified legislative agenda.
Some people say it's Valentine's Weekend because that's what all the women are saying.
Yeah, Valentine's Weekend. All the men are saying President's Weekend.
I want to ask you about this because if you're here, you can't not ask you about
Okay.
this, about the, in 2011, I believe, you were put on probation
Yes.
because of your personality.
No, I mean, it was. I was targeted by the New York Post. I had a post photographer go after my family and threaten my mother, and I responded. I called the police. We had a confrontation. I always maintained my innocence, that I never touched him or anything to him. You had a photographer that lied in open court and said that he lied to the grand jury, that he didn't know how he got injured, and I never touched his camera. The judge didn't believe that, and
So you had 3 years probation, which is about up now.
Yeah, no, well, actually, I only served about a year and a half because of of my good behavior.
Your good behavior.
Senator, it's interesting. I think that it's maybe an issue really to raise. I know Mark's such a nice guy, no, truthfully.
Yes.
But I've had assemblymen off the cuff. I mean, they didn't have any troubles. They say the reporters are so aggressive. They're like, you say, you little schmutz. They're looking for like some, to say, oh, you're a nice guy. I mean, to me, you're doing a good job. I like you, but fine. That's
Mark has known me for a long time. Mark will tell you first thing. I've never run away from a photographer.
Right.
I've never run away from an interview. I'm happy to talk to anybody, and I'll answer any question. But going to my house and harassing my mom at the time, God rest her soul, my at the time sick mother, was out of bounds. And even then, I called the police 4 times without a proper response from the New York City Police Department, and certainly didn't get a fair hearing from the mayor at the time, who was not a friend of mine, or the police commissioner who also was not a friend of mine. And so a lot of this was politically motivated. And by the way, while we're talking about these things, part of that was connected to the fact that you had a billionaire mayor who gave Simca Felder about $3 million to run against me.
Oh.
And after I beat them 50% in a 3-way race, then decided that he was going to sick his friends in media after me. So it was what it was. It's somewhat of the hazard that we have as elected officials. And so that part of my life is over, and we're moving forward, and we're trying to do good things for the people of the state.
I just want to make sure that you're fine, and that you're moving forward in a positive way, and you're staying in check here.
Yeah, look, we had a great legislative year last year. I passed 11 bills out of the body. Only other person who passed more bills than me as a Democrat in the state Senate was Andrea Stewart-Cousins, the leader.
Right.
She had 8 of her bills go to the governor to become chapters. 6 became chapters. Of the 11 I sent, 5 of mine went to the governor. All 5 became chapters, and we chaptered more. Again, other than the leader, I chaptered more pieces of legislation than any other Democratic member of the state Senate. And so I feel really good about my legislative accomplishments, and we'll continue to kind of work hard for the people of my district and the people of the state.
This is the 3rd thing he's going to applaud you for.
It is the truth. It's because, listen, bottom line, you're for over 10 years, you're 10 years as senator, and it's a very diverse community. You could say, well, it's African American, but it's not.
No.
Like I said, there's a lot of Jews, a lot of other people,
Yep.
and if you're winning, and then it shows that you're doing the people's work. That's really what it is.
I'm trying to be responsive and try to hear people out and try to do the things that we think will be the best things for people and their families over time.
How frustrated are you with how fractured the Democrats are, where you can have 33 members, but you have 24 what I call regular Democrats, 5 independent Democrats, 1 vacant seat with Eric Adams' seat, 1 Simcha Felder conferencing with the Republicans, and then you got Malcolm Smith and John Sampson, who I saw the pictures, they were taken down. They're not even up there with all the other Democratic senators. So they were kind of kicked out. I mean, here are the 2 people who were majority leader, who were ahead of the top of the line, and now all of a sudden they're ostracized or kicked out.
This legislative session has been very odd from that perspective. One of which, I guess, the biggest thing I've been frustrated about was the governor's unwillingness to call a special election, even though we had about 2 million people in the state who were being unrepresented because their members had gone onto other seats or left or whatever.
10 assembly seats and 2 Senate seats.
2 Senate seats. Like I said, about 2 million people are going unrepresented as we sit here today. And so we actually negotiated $143 billion budget short, 10 people, right? And 12 people, and like I said, about 2 million people not being represented. That was a big deal for me. I think that the dynamic of the Senate has not been that frustrating. So I think that we still, despite that, have not been able to get. We have been able to get things done. I think as a member of the Democratic Conference of the State Senate, if I could talk again a little bit politically, it is our job to win elections, and it's our job to win elections and get people in those seats who are going to conference with us and sit with us and share our values. We have not done that to this point. I think that we have an opportunity to do that again this year, and I expect some positive results. I guess I'm optimistic because when I first came to the Senate, we had not been in power in 70 years, and people laughed at me when I said that we're going to go to majority. And 6 years later, we went to the majority. And although we held it for only one session, we had done something that no one else had been able to do, and people told us was impossible. And so I continue to believe, and I know that we will. Fight our hardest on the values that we're running on, and I expect us to be victorious in September.
Just like the Mets, you got to believe.
You got to believe,
Okay.
exactly.
All right,
Exactly.
I think
We're out of time, Senator, but it was really nice
Thank
talking to you, and I'm sure that our viewers also enjoyed it. So we want to always end with a blessing. Continue with your good work for the people, as we said, with good health.
Thank you so much.
Very much.
Thanks
Thank you
for
for
coming
having
on
me.
the show.